Here in the Rocky Mountain West, a sense of urgency is growing in the effort to preserve native wildlands. People are increasingly concerned about the impact of human activity on the environment. We're all familiar with the issues of logging, mining, overgrazing, and development. However, one often overlooked side effect of such activities is the propagation of non-native invasive weeds. In the 1800s, weed seeds were imported to this country and contaminated hay and crop seed. These weeds evolved in Europe and Asia with insects and diseases that kept their growth in check. But here, without natural enemies, these hardy species have spread rapidly, crowding out native vegetation. Seeds are carried by wind, water, vehicles, and animals. Weeds establish themselves on land disturbed by any human use or natural event that strips away the local vegetation.
Certainly overgrazing is one way. Once the grasses are grazed to the ground, they lack the ability again to develop the roots, to pull up the nutrients and water, and that just gives knapweed the right to come on in and take over those resources. Maybe the largest damage is that we fragmented the landscape and created what I call disturbance conduits. These disturbance sites, roads, roadsides, trails, cattle trails, even tracks made by off-road vehicles, hikers, provide bare spots in the ground that allow weeds to become established. Weeds use these sites to develop and increase their seed production. And in the worst case, the noxious weeds like diffuse knapweed, it allows them then to invade what we consider to be undisturbed areas.
Weeds overgrow streams and canals, damaging nesting areas for birds and small mammals. Wildlife and livestock often avoid eating the weeds. This makes the land less useful for wilderness or ranching and reduces property values. These effects, plus the high cost of control, make weeds a major economic as well as environmental threat to the West.
The effect that leafy spurge has on wildlife is tough to quantify. The best that we've been able to determine is that in the four-state area of Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, is that leafy spurge costs roughly about $8 to $9 million economically in terms of wildlife effects. And what that basically entails is decreased carrying capacity of the rangeland and any type of supplemental feeding that needs to be done in order for native wildlife to survive.
Millions of acres of western lands are now infested with weeds, and the damage grows as thousands of acres are added each year. A widespread effort is underway to get a grip on this enormous problem. Federal, state, and local governments are implementing control programs. Currently, the primary tool used in most weed control programs is spraying with chemical herbicides. The safety and long-term effectiveness of herbicides are hotly debated issues. Many are concerned by the potential hazards to human health and to non-target plants and animals. It's our position that in light of these concerns, herbicides should only be used where other methods are not effective and when hazards can be minimized.
With herbicides, I see two major concerns. First, there's the human health risks, which are very real and maybe understated. There's the fact that most herbicides come along with their inert ingredients, that they won't tell us what's in them. As a scientist, my mission's to reduce uncertainty, and I feel frustrated that I can't reduce uncertainty if no one tells me what's in these things, so that really how can the risk be evaluated? The second risk is to the native environment. Herbicides were developed to kill specific species, often in agronomic crops. They're now being used in natural areas where their effects on the native biota have essentially been untested.
Weed managers do use some non-chemical methods in addition to herbicides, but there is established resistance to the idea of chemical-free weed control. Weed management is a young and developing science. Yet, because of the urgency of the problem, managers often rely on chemicals to kill weeds quickly instead of fully researching the alternatives. Non-chemical weed control programs are now considered experimental, when in fact, all weed control efforts are experiments, because circumstances vary and the long-term effectiveness of each program remains to be seen. Many varieties of noxious weeds are penetrating the Rocky Mountain landscape. These species have competitive advantages over natives, such as deep root systems, prolific seed production, and long-term seed viability. Some can even alter soil chemistry to suppress the growth of native competitors. There are several different knapweed species infesting our region. These include spotted and diffuse knapweed. Studies show elk numbers are reduced in knapweed-infested areas. The value of the land for recreation is also reduced, since knapweed is an unattractive and thorny plant that can eliminate more attractive native plants from an area. Several species of non-native thistle also plague our area. Among these are Canada, musk, and plumeless thistles. These thistles can be very aversive to cattle and are damaging to rangeland and public lands across the West. It's important to note that some thistles are native, and proper identification must be made before control methods are applied. Native thistles are an important part of the ecosystem. Leafy spurge now infests nearly 3 million acres of land in 29 states. It destroys grazing lands for cattle and horses, degrades wildlife habitat, and greatly reduces plant diversity. Spurge has been a tremendous economic burden to our region due to the cost of control and the reduction of property values. In addition to accidentally introduced species, very serious problems have been caused by plants introduced deliberately for ornamental or functional value.
Invasive ornamentals are a huge problem for us here at the park and for the broader landscape. Basically, what I mean by that is plants that are decorative or considered useful and are deliberately planted in people's gardens or landscaping that then are able to escape into the wild and create problems.
Tansy is a common ornamental that grows well in many gardens. Unfortunately, it can escape and invade neighboring lands and stream beds. It outcompetes native plants, provides poor forage for animals, and can restrict water flow in irrigation ditches. Dame's rocket seeds have been included in wildflower seed mixes until recent regulations banned their sale in Colorado. Dame's rocket is another invader of streams and marshes. These invasive ornamentals cost huge sums of money to control and often lead land managers to increase the use of chemicals. There are a number of non-chemical methods that are proving to be effective in controlling weed infestations. These include biocontrol, manual controls, grazing, and land rehabilitation. Many are coming to believe that biocontrol can be the most effective, least hazardous, and most affordable method of controlling large weed infestations. Biocontrol programs take parasitic insects from the weed's land of origin and release them onto infested terrain here. Insects are imported, which attack many different kinds of weeds. Government programs often make these insects available for little or no charge.
The costs of our biocontrol effort for diffuse knapweed in the state of Colorado is zero. All of the species are available free from the Department of Agriculture so that private landowners or managers of public areas can obtain these insects, release them on the site, and in time, hopefully see the control that we've seen at our site. 4 years ago, the Boulder County Commissioners gave my group at the University of Colorado at Boulder the opportunity to attempt to demonstrate that diffuse knapweed could be controlled using non-chemical techniques. The biocontrol part of our weed management on our diffuse knapweed has involved adding a suite of insect species